everybody, I am headed to pick up my uncle and drive him to Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm really excited. We are going to a Friends of the HUNLEY event at the HUNLEY Museum, and I'm going to take the vlog along, get some footage, and talk to you about how the experience goes. I really hope you enjoy this video. This is the Warren Lash Conservation Center. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina with my uncle, who has been a Friend of the HUNLEY member for over 20 years. He brought me along for a really fun, members-only event at the museum where we were able to meet with some of the scientists who are doing work and research on the submarine, and the scientists shared their finding with the members in private tours. I really enjoyed this experience, and I wanted to share what I learned and some of the footage that I took while we were there with the vlog. This is not going to be an in-depth video with a long history of the HUNLEY submarine, so I've put some links below in the description box if you would like to learn more about it. I have visited this museum once before in 2009, but a lot of research has been done since then, and the museum has changed quite a bit. It seems like the more research that is done on the HUNLEY, the more and more questions arise. In a nutshell, the H.L. HUNLEY was a submarine manufactured by the Confederate States of America that played a small but significant role during the American Civil War. In the early 1860s, the entire South was in a blockade chokehold. The United States naval warships were stationed all along the coastline and guarded every single major port, preventing the South from being able to get any supplies in or out of any of their harbors. The HUNLEY was designed with the intention of trying to sink these warships and open up the southern harbors. The HUNLEY was not the first submarine in history, but it was the first combat submarine to ever be successful in war. At almost 40 feet long, the HUNLEY was originally built in Mobile, Alabama, and launched for the first time in July of 1863 under the nickname of a fish torpedo boat. She was then secretly shipped by railways through the nights in August of 1863 to Charleston, South Carolina. 2 test runs were performed in August and October of 1863, but each test was unsuccessful and the entire crews perished, 5 men in the first test and 8 in the second. After the first sinking, the HUNLEY was raised and returned into service. But after the second sinking, the HUNLEY was considered a failure and plans were made to retire the submarine. However, a man named Captain George Dixon applied for and received permission from his superiors to perform a third and final expedition with the submarine with just a few requirements. The entire crew must be made up entirely of all volunteers, and they were expected not to use the submarine completely underwater, but instead to just dip slightly below the surface, where they could use snorkels if need be to let fresh air into the capsule while they were making their way out into the Charleston harbor. Captain Dixon was able to recruit 7 volunteers, and he made plans yet again to attempt to use the submarine to sink a Yankee warship. The HUNLEY's third and final expedition was performed on February 17, 1864, when it was launched at and successfully sank the 1,240-ton United States Navy warship called the Housatonic, which had been on blockade duty in Charleston's outer harbor. However, for reasons unknown, the HUNLEY did not survive this attack and sank, taking all 8 crew members with her, and was lost at sea for over 130 years.
Friends Weekend, thanks for being a member of the Friends of the HUNLEY. It supports the work that the Friends do, and certainly those of us connected to Clemson's Restoration Institute and the Warren Lash Conservation Center. My name is Greg Barley. I am a researcher. I predominantly work on artifacts and genealogy, relationship to crew and those associated with the HUNLEY.
My name is Mike Scafuri. I'm the senior archaeologist here at the lab. And you've had a very informative, I'm sure, discussion of the operation of the submarine, navigation, propulsion, the depth gauge, compass. And so what I want to stop you here and go over this. This is a mock-up of the captain's area, grid 1. This is where he worked, 1-to-1 scale. We gave all the data to a guy, a welder, who put this all together for us. We wanted to use this as a tool to understand everything that's going on here. And then we, in addition to making the area, we then rebuilt all the components. Here's the diplane adjustment connecting rod with a counterbalance to pitch the submarine up and down. Here's the tiller, turn the submarine very slowly, turn the rudder. The outflow pipe here with a valve to pump water out. The inflow pipe would have been up there. And then we took all the artifacts, put them back in position as they were found archaeologically. We use this as a way to understand this entire site, this entire environment. One of the things we're trying to do, in addition to well, obviously the big thing, is to answer the big question: what happened to the submarine? How did it end up on the bottom? And how did the crew die? And we use studying small components of that to answer that big question. And then we go smaller and look at the individual artifacts. Well, putting everything back into place is such a good tool for us. It's called reconstructive archaeology. You could take high-resolution photos. You can even make three-dimensional reconstructions. It's not the same thing. It gives you information, but not like this. This gives us an understanding of what it was like. What's the spatial relationship? Where would the captain sit, and what was in arm's reach? What could he access? And so we put everything back to the way we found it. One of the first things I noticed is that when I stand in here, my armpits are outside of the submarine. It's only 4 feet high, right? I am about an inch taller than Dixon, but still, when you get inside the submarine, you can't even sit up. It's too cramped, right? And so we put all the artifacts back in, and one of the things we were able to do was start figuring out what their function was. You see all the artifacts. We have some tools. We have this T handled. It's got kind of like an Allen wrench thing on the end. No idea what it's for. We found this piece of wood here. Obviously, this looks like a seat of some sort. So we tried to figure out how it would be used. I mean, it was just like this, kind of floating up. It's wood, so it moves around, with a flooded submarine. So we thought initially that it would sit like this. But then we played with it, and we saw these little cut out here, like a chamfer here, cut out there. We realized it actually goes this way because of the curve of the hull. So you can actually place it back in, slots in just like that, and you see the tiller, he basically cut away the corner to fit the tiller, and then the other cutaway fits nicely over the outflow pipe. Now we didn't know that. I mean, you take the artifact out of context, you don't know that. We rebuilt it, and we were able to play around with it and figure out where it went. We're trying to do that with all this stuff, because I gotta be honest, there's a lot of things here we have no idea. We can speculate though, and I like to speculate. We understand that it's speculation. We found this piece of wood. It's kind of like just like a little slab with a notch cut in, like a scrap piece of wood. All right, maybe it's just scrap. Well, why does he have it? Wood. And then we played with it. One of the things we thought was that when you're traveling at sea, you need a way to refresh the air. They had a snorkel box, but something quick and easy. You could open a hatch, but you need a way to prop it open. Right? All you need is a piece of wood. You don't need anything elaborate, just a little. It even has the divot from where the heavy hatch cover would come to rest. Maybe. I mean, we thought maybe because it kind of fits in your hand, maybe it would be kind of so valuable just to be able to see everything in context. I wish we could do this with a whole submarine. We don't have that kind of money, so so we've been able to figure out a lot of things. So everything you see may have an explanation, may not. A piece of wire with a loop like this. The gauge is different; it's a little bit thinner. We found a spool of wire on the other side of the bulkhead, possibly related to the trigger mechanism, or this is to hold something in place. We don't know. But clearly for a purpose, right? It twisted something around, and it was found right here. If you look back here, you can see this flat piece of what's metal with a hole in it. That was the locking mechanism for the forward hatch. It was off to the side like that. The way it works, it's a bar with a hole in it. You feed a rod through it and it hooks onto the underside of the hatch cover. You dog it down and it closes. The problem with that is that Dixon's sitting here. As I said, he cannot even sit up. The only way he sits up is if he sticks his head in the hatch. So he's actually the only person on board who can sit up, who isn't punched over, right? Unless they can do something else. Love to be able to play with that idea too. Maybe put your feet up, but it's hard to determine that virtually or with pictures, right? You almost need to do something like this. But if you put the locking mechanism in place, he wouldn't be able to put his head in the hatch. So he's now not able to sit up. It makes sense for him to be able to use the hatch to navigate because he's the only one that can see out through the viewports. He's guiding the submarine in on target. Well, one of the ideas is that after the attack, they went to the bottom. I don't know if you discussed it up on the mezzanine, but because of the currents and tides and the slow velocity of the submarine, one idea is that they had to wait for the tide to change. And one way to do that is to go sit on the bottom. It's the only way they can stay out there and not get attacked by the Union Navy is to go hide on the water. So you would expect then if they did that on purpose. There's no evidence of panic on board, so I don't think it was a simple just flooding and drowning. If they were going to do that, you would think they would have closed the hatch and locked the hatch, preventing him from putting his head up there, but allowing them to go in the water. And we found the hatch unlocked. Like the locking mechanism is detached and off to the side. So, you know, I wouldn't dive without locking the hatch down. Now maybe he went to the bottom and then unlocked it because it's uncomfortable. Right? So we're always trying to understand what it was like for these guys, because archaeology is about people, it's not about our objects. We use our objects, but only just to get to better understanding of who these people were and what they went through. We want to reconstruct their life experiences and their engagement in this event. And so understanding the environment inside the submarine, what was comfortable, what was awkward, was it hot or cold, did it smell, you know? This all affects the human experience here. And this can also affect on a 4-hour mission. If people are uncomfortable, are they going to make bad decisions? They're going to do things that they wouldn't normally do, because we're always trying to add this all in. The more information, the better. The more we can understand, the better to tell the story and get a better picture of what it was like. Any questions?
There's a reason you have it rolled on 45 degrees?
Oh yeah, that's how we found the submarine.
I'm going to say that. Maybe that's how
It was heeled over 45 degrees.
Okay.
It's centerline heavy. The keel blocks and ballast blocks, most of the weight was centerline. That's what you want on a submarine, so it's stable, right? So it doesn't weeble wobble on the surface. But when it hits the bottom, it starts to sink into the sediment. So it was found buried 3 feet down. As it worked its way into the sediment, it's going to cant one way or the other. And that's why it ended up
I
this
knew
way.
there was a reason for that.
It was recovered this way too, because we wanted to know the site formation, right? What had happened to the submarine in the intervening 136, 140, 150 years. Was moved around. We did sediment cores, proving that the submarine actually, the material above the submarine dates to the late 19th century, like the 1880s. So it was never exposed, was never disturbed by a hurricane or anything. So, and the sediment inside the submarine is all horizontal to present, which means that it sat at this orientation since the sediment started accumulating. When that was, we don't know. The evidence for that is kind of washed away by now. All right, guys, so once you head over this way, you can see some of these artifacts in person.
So
Hi.
this is the depth gauge that they had talked about.
The mercury, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So it would have been right here in Dixon Station, right behind the shelf that you
That's
had.
great for
The
us.
compass box with the sat you had the lantern and some other tools and stuff on the shelf there. The tubing was attached to this valve here, which is actually this one that's all created. They would have opened the valve and allowed the seawater to flow through the tubing, and it would have pushed the mercury up through the glass
Oh, yeah.
pipette that would have been extended up to here. At some point during their mission, the glass pipette was broken. It was found at the bottom of the sub during the excavation, but we know it was broken before it sank because somebody has capped it. There's a small little cork in the top, so we know that somebody had done that prior to the sinking.
Wow.
They did carry additional mercury with them just in case if they needed it. It was stored in a metal bottle with a cork in it. Excuse me. This is the unknown bale of wire that they are not sure what it was used for. And then we have Dixon C. So, like Mike was saying, it sat right underneath the conning tower.
That's the real one.
Yes. So it's in three separate pieces. There's the one there, and then the other piece would have sat right on top, just like that. As he said, he showed. The crew members would have also used that as a step as they were coming into the sub. They would have stepped on it, stepped down, and then gone into their station. This bench plus all of the additional benches, this is all of the crew members' benches. They were treated in a solution called polyethylene glycol. What we do is we slowly impregnate the wood with that mixture, and it replaces the water inside of the wood cells with that material.
Yeah.
As we slowly increase the percentage of it, it bulks out those cells. Then we freeze it at a very low temperature, like -40, and then we freeze dry it. And then that way the peg solidifies again, we remove all of the moisture, and all of the wood artifacts keep their shape. So all of the wood has been treated in that process.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Even that wood too?
This is wood also.
Yeah.
One thing that you will see that's a little bit different, so if you look up here, you can tell where wood burrows and such got to it. And that is because when the sediment started coming inside the submarine, the benches that were at the bottom were covered first. So the top of the depth gauge stuck out, so it was able, it got eaten.
Wow.
So just this top little bit, and then everything else was covered. The sediment creates an anoxic environment, and those pests are able to get in there.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Submarine. These conglomerate of tools were found all together here in the range. It was completely covered with compression, bags, the handle of the hammer. These bolts were towards the back. And first we had to separate all these tools to be able to conserve them by itself. And then we have here the hammer. And if you notice it's orange, that's because the iron corrosion products from the submarine kind of permeate everything inside of the submarine. And here we have two different materials. So we have to kind of separate the treatment. So one bag had one chemical, the bottom had another chemical, and that's how there was no way to separate it. There was a swollen cheek that would not match the head. But after it was tried out, it was finally able to remove the head and that was used for the operation of the submarine. It looks like metal, but it's actually wrought iron. It's just a part of the nature of how it's working.
All in all, a total of 21 crewmen had died in the 3 expeditions of the HUNLEY's career. In 1995, the HUNLEY was located and was raised 5 years later in 2000. It has been on display under scientific research at the Warren Lash Conservation Center on the Cooper River in Charleston, South Carolina ever since. Much like the Vasa warship in Sweden, the HUNLEY has been housed in a tank of a special solution to help preserve it long-term, with the hopes of one day being able to remove it from the bath and place it on a permanent display. However, sometimes it seems like the more the submarine is studied, the more questions it continues to pose. A big question often asked is what exactly happened to the 8 crewmen who died on the HUNLEY's third, final, and successful mission to sink the Housatonic? The crewmen were able to be recovered out of the submarine in 2004 and received a proper burial, and that's when interesting theories began to circulate about what had caused their deaths. Prior to 2004, I think it was more or less assumed that the crew probably died as a result of drowning. Likely, they were unable to bring the submarine back to the surface after impact with the Housatonic to get fresh air, or they were unable to get out of the submarine to swim for fresh air. Confusion over whether or not a blue light was shined towards the shore after impact and before detonation has become another question mark in history, as some people on shore reported that they were certain that they saw the submarine send a victory signal to those on land, and others were not so sure. After being able to enter the HUNLEY to study and remove the bodies of the crew members in 2004, scientists quickly dismissed the drowning theory. All 8 crew members were in their proper stations inside the vessel, seemingly resting in peace calmly, frozen in time. There were no signs of a panic on board, no frantic attempt to swim for the hatch or find a way to get air from inside. At this point, 2 popular theories began to bounce around that perhaps the crew had died as either a result of the impact with the warship or during the explosion shortly thereafterwards when their torpedo detonated. The blue light signal that may or may not have been seen by comrades on land became really important, as it would be key to telling whether the crew survived the initial impact with the ship to later perish with the detonation. Still, other people theorized that the crew may have survived the impact but suffered concussions from the blowback of the explosion and were perhaps just cognitively unable to think their way out of the danger that they were in. When I visited the HUNLEY in 2009, I remember thinking that the concussion theory made the most sense to me. However, when here at the Friends of the HUNLEY Members Only event today, it's now being reported that this is no longer a working theory. Further research on the nature of the impact and its effect on both the submarine and on the Housatonic, as well as on the direction and success of the fiery explosion itself, has lended credence to actually both theories. According to the scientist that we talked to, it now seems much more likely that the crew did not suffer in the impact with the warship or during the blowback from the explosion, as the gunpowder exploded inside the ship in a mostly vertical trajectory. It's now considered more likely that the crew survived both the impact and the explosion. Maybe they really did shine the blue light of success to their friends on land. The new working theory is that the crewmen were probably fearful that the naval seamen inside the Housatonic would try to retaliate on the submarine, and they decided to defy their order to stay on the surface and instead went deep underneath the water to hide out and wait for the changing of the tides so that they could pedal themselves more easily back to safety in the harbor. In going to the bottom of the ocean to hide, with no way to access fresh air and only able to rebreathe in their own carbon dioxide inside the submarine, they may very well have just become overwhelmingly sleepy and eventually passed out underwater as they slowly ran out of oxygen, hence their lack of signs of struggle to survive. Many of the artifacts rescued from the submarine were not on display when I visited 15 years ago, and my uncle had only ever seen them in photographs, not in person. Stunning jewelry, coins, and buttons were found with the human remains, which played a large part in helping to identify which crewman was who. However, something we learned during one of the scientists' talks today was that there were 13 doll buttons found with the crew captain, George Dixon. These doll buttons were not on display today, but they were described to us as unmistakably buttons made to go on a doll's dress or perhaps on a very, very small child's clothing. There is no explanation as to why Captain Dixon would have carried 13 doll's buttons to the bottom of the harbor, and this has become yet another mystery of the HUNLEY that may never be solved. A much more famous artifact found on Captain Dixon was a gold coin said to be given to him by his sweetheart, Queenie Bennett. Queenie had asked him to carry the coin as a token of her love and affection and for good luck. Dixon had always kept the coin with him, and it was in his trousers pocket at the Battle of Shiloh when he was struck in the upper thigh by a minie ball. When the wound was examined by the field surgeon, It was determined that the bullet had struck the coin directly in the center, bending the coin, but saving Dixon's leg by absorbing much of the impact. The gold coin is on display at the Hunley Museum today, and it played a large part in helping to identify Captain Dixon as confirmation of his remains that were found in the expected location of the submarine where a captain would be located. A final question posed not only by my uncle, but by many other members of the Friends of the Hunley who attended this event today, is what is the long-term plan for this submarine? Obviously, it is currently housed in the Warren Lash Conservation Center, but this is not a facility where the ship can reside forever once research is complete and preservation is ensured. My uncle remembers a few years ago, the Members magazine mentioned that there were several facilities vying for possession of the Hunley, offering big dollar amounts to purchase the ship and advertising the types of elaborate displays that they would create to showcase it to the public. We were told by the scientists that talked to our group today that currently the Hunley is not committed to any permanent residence yet. There is still so much research to be done on the submarine, and restoration and preservation is taking longer than originally expected, so no final decision has been made yet. He says it is everyone's hope and expectation that the submarine will remain in the Charleston area if at all possible. All 3 crews that died in the various expeditions of the Hunley are buried in the Magnolia Cemetery in Charleston, and it is everyone's hope that the submarine will remain local with the crews as a part of Charleston's rich and colorful history.